Hello and welcome to the Berean Bookclub Podcast with your hosts Francois Poe and Conrad Rieder, the podcast where we discuss books written by saints both dead and alive to see what they can teach us and the church today, and hopefully spur us on in our love for Christ. We're so glad you're joining us.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of season 4 of the Berean Bookclub Podcast. So sweet to still have you along for the ride and for the journey. A really exciting episode today on a number of fronts. We've got some exciting news and an exciting book to hop into. You say one bit of news and I'll say the other bit of news.
So I think the first bit of news that we are quite excited is just a partnership with Christian book discounters. They have given us one of these copies. So we have the physical book, as you can see. We listen to most of them, but they are available to buy at Christian book discounters, and they've given us one for a giveaway. So we are very excited to do that. We'll give all the details for the giveaway at the end of the episode. But if you listen to today's episode and you really want to delve into it a bit deeper, then you can grab the book into the giveaway or go and buy it yourself. So thank you, Christian Books Discounters, for that.
That was shocking. You're not allowed any more of those for the rest of the episode.
I won't. So that's exciting.
The other bit of exciting news, as you would have already heard at the start of this episode, is we've got a new jingle. If you've been along for the ride for quite some time now, you will know the classic Berean Book Club jingle as the episode starts and between breaks and so on. We both have a close friend who we studied with at George Whitfield College a whole number of years ago, an incredible muso. And a couple of weeks ago, reached out and asked if he would mind writing us our own custom jingle. The one we've been using is a paid-for one that we've used for a while now. Matt has put something incredible together for us.
Yes, thanks, Matty.
Yeah, bro, thank you so much. It's super cool. Let us know what you think of the new jingle as well. Maybe just worth mentioning as well, Matt himself has a podcast too, called Faith Seeking Understanding. Definitely worthwhile checking that out as well. Kind of crossing lines where faith and understanding kind of meet in the Christian world, as they discuss a whole range of topics, from some apologetic stuff to some Bible stuff. A lot of really, really cool stuff out there, and definitely worth your while checking out. So we'll put a link in the description below to Maddie's podcast so that you can check that out as well. But just to say thanks, Matt, big time. It's super cool.
Thanks, Maddie. He was like the clever guy in the class, and so if you want to really learn about stuff, he's the guy you go to. So
that's the right podcast.
Highly recommend Matt and Roland.
Yeah, super cool. Very excited about today's book.
Yeah, me too. I think, as I said last time, JT English and actually together with Jen Wilkin and Carl Worley, they've had quite a big impact on my life, especially just BTI, and the work that we started there was very much influenced by what they were doing inside their local church. And I've been following their journey, and this book is actually just putting it all together in one place. And so for me to have read this, it's made sense of kind of my ministry philosophy in a sense. And I've greatly enjoyed it, and I'm quite excited to talk about that and some of the stuff I've learned as I've tried to implement it in various places. So
yeah, I think it's been cool for me just reading this book over this last month, seeing the impact that it's had on you. I know that you haven't read it before either up until this month, but just thinking back to some conversations that we've had, how you've spoken and how you've lived and done ministry things, it's clear to see the kind of impact that JT and them have had on certain spheres of your life. So that's been really cool to see now, just reading the book and looking back. And so I'm very keen and eager for our discussion today.
Awesome.
Cool. Maybe as we hop in, like all books, JT is not writing in a vacuum here. These are kind of things which are going on for them. What would JT say is the problem with the church today?
So he's writing a book on discipleship, and he asked the big questions: what is wrong with discipleship in the local church today? And the reason why he starts off with that question is, if we misdiagnose what's wrong, whatever we're going to try and do to solve that problem is going to be based on kind of a faulty assumption. And so we do need to take some time just to think about what is wrong with discipleship in the church at the moment. And I assume if we were to have a discussion with a whole bunch of people, there would be a whole bunch of answers that gets given. And that is partly shaped by both our experience of church ourselves and kind of different emphases we see in the Bible if we're trying to be faithful to that. One of the things that JT says is, as we look out at the church today, it feels like we are expecting way too little from people. And so his experience is not that people kind of don't want deep discipleship. He was saying, as he started to implement some of these things, he's recognized that people are really hungry for deep, whether it's theology, whether it's deep engaging with scripture, or whether it's deep thinking about spiritual habits, which we'll all touch on. But it's not that the church is not hungry for those things. But what has happened as we've evaluated church culture, it seems like what we've gone is like, we're expecting too much from people. Let's lower the bar of expectation, lowest common denominator when it comes to commitment to church. And that's what we basically spoke about with, what was that, Compelling Community by Deva. And the focus of his book is then, how does that play itself out within like the learning spaces within churches? So how we think about what do we want to teach people in church? Do we just teach them the basic gospel, Jesus is enough, and that's where we leave it? Or do we give them more? And he just said that if we are going to kind of settle for lowest common denominator theology in our churches, we shouldn't be surprised when there are issues down the line. And so that's really, he's looking out at the church, and he thinks that we're not giving people enough as they come to church. We're actually giving them too little. And when the difficulties of life comes, whether that's suffering or whether that's objections to the Christian faith, we haven't developed robust disciples that can handle life and all that life throws at them. So that's kind of where he's at with regards to what the problem is. I mean, there's this quote that I have written down. It's not that discipline is dead. It just follows the most compelling desire. And I've written that down on my wall. And one of the things that says, like, if you go and you watch people, they are crazy. They sign up for half marathons. They sign up for CrossFit. It's not that discipline is dead. It just follows the most compelling desire. And his hope is that we can hold up a view of God and being a disciple of this God that is the most compelling desire, and along with that then will come a whole bunch of other things.
Sure. I think it's such a helpful way to just frame the problem. He'll obviously offer a particular solution to that in some language which is maybe a little bit more kind of what we're used to and where a lot of the conversation lies nowadays with discipleship and stuff. But I think the way in which he diagnoses the problem is so helpful, and particularly if he's saying, like, in order for us to deal with this properly, we need to diagnose it properly. He's got the refrain that he says, regularly, it's we tend to give people what they want, not what they need. And I think what he's saying is that means we're almost scared to give people too much, and because we're afraid of overloading on whatever front, we tend to draw back and not really have a depth to the discipleship. It's not like we're not making disciples or we're not thinking about discipling. I don't think that's what he's saying at all. He's just calling for a depth to that, and not to be scared to set the bar somewhere. And that's obviously behind the title of his book.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And he speaks about two ways in which that plays out. So he speaks about discipleship for autonomy. So that's where we kind of disciple that's self-centered rather than God-centered. So it's all about just Christianity is there for self-improvement. So we give you Christ, and that gives you kind of just a better life. Like if you follow his ways, it's going to be good for work, it's going to be good for your marriage, it's going to be good for all of that. And he contrasts that with a God-centered discipleship, which is focused on who he is, and in light of that, the opposite of self-actualization or improvement is self-denial at the core of the Christian life. So that's this individualistic world that we live in, how it plays itself out in the church. We disciple for individuals, right? And for their self-improvement. And then the other one, and I think this one is a little bit more scary, is the apathy. We want to maintain people in church. Our biggest concern is that they don't leave, but they can be happy at church. He's got this quote, people may be satisfied with church, but bored with Jesus. And he's saying those are two of the main ways that churches are not necessarily intentionally, but discipling people. And he says we have to have a greater vision for what discipleship entails, and that's definitely not apathy. It's like you love Jesus. The church is then where that plays itself out. But we don't want to keep you here if you're not in love with Jesus, or at least growing in your love for Jesus. And then we're also not here to help you improve yourself so that you're a better husband or better businessman. We want you to obey what God has called you to for the sake of his glory. And that reframes how we think about discipleship.
I mean, it's just interesting to read him speak about these things. He shows so well how a lot of our kind of discipleship models and way of thinking about things, and even the topics we're handling and the courses that we offer, it's at least worth asking the question, why are we offering those courses? What's the kind of vision and the idea which lies behind that kind of stuff? And he showed really well how sometimes even what drives our approaches and our methods and our models is a kind of like autonomous idea of discipleship, that I'm coming to church for me.
Yes.
And obviously that has its extremes in kind of like, you go to church on a Sunday and you just hear a motivational talk, etc. But I think it's a little bit closer to home than that. You can still have like really robust biblical input, serving you. So it looks good, but the entire kind of like philosophy behind the method is quite a bit more autonomous than inward looking than upward looking. To put it that way.
And that's this whole first chapter. Is he pushes us to look up, to have a God-centered view of discipleship, and for churches to be the ones who recognize that they've been given the responsibility of discipleship. And so we don't want to outsource discipleship outside of the church. It's the church has been given the role of discipling men and women. And so we want to take that very seriously, and not kind of, okay, this aspect you do, this aspect you do, and we'll do the Sunday sermon, right? There's more to, even if we just look at the Great Commission, than just preaching on a Sunday. It is both baptizing and teaching them all that I've commanded, and that's kind of we want to encompass all of that, and the church has been given that role.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been a particular experience which has shaped a bit of this for JD. He tells a story up front in the book where I think he had just become a Christian. My memory's foggier, but end of high school or university years or something like that. And at some point, he just felt like this desire to grow, in his in his walk with the Lord. And he had reached out to somebody who had suggested if he wants to grow, like deeply grow, he should go to Bible college, or to seminary. And he reflects on that moment, going, "Is it right that as a church we are saying to folk, if you really want to grow deeply, you've got to leave here, you've got to go somewhere else, And that's quite a formative moment for him to really question where growth, and particularly deep growth, holistic growth, should happen in the local church for him. And the question is, how? What are we doing to kind of do that?
And I'd like just to, on that point, JT will at no point say it's not very valuable for men and women who are serious about full-time ministry to go to seminary and to spend that formative time there. I think he's just putting it out there, saying, okay, those are maybe for those who go into full-time ministry. We are called to make disciples of all men and women who come into our churches, even our children, right? And what is the church going to do to fulfill some of that? Because it can't be we give you nothing and then you go to seminary.
That's right.
There's different levels, and I mean, he does a good job of laying that all out. But in a very real sense, he wants to recapture something that was lost, and that is the place of, at least for him here in the context we will touch on a bit, like theological education within the church, that has usually been outsourced to, whether it's your YouTube pastors that you listen to, or whether it's online degree or actually going to seminary, that the church is actually a place that could do a lot of that work.
I think this is one of the most attractive things to me about just his way of making sense of discipleship. It really goes a long way in closing that gap between those in the church who are almost like perceived to be the spiritual elite, who know so much, and then just the ordinary member. What JT puts forward is this vision of discipleship, which is deep, which is serious, which has a high standard, is for every single follower of Jesus. I think over time it holds the potential to really flatten that gap out a little bit, so that you don't have like the know-it-alls and the spiritually elite, and just the ordinary folk in church, but this is something which every follower of Jesus takes seriously and dives headfirst into, and that's got theological education as a core part of that,
and not the only part, but a core part. I'm doing a book with some members in my church called "Everyone's a Theologian," and it's precisely kind of the desire there. It's like, this is not just for us pastors who are preaching. This is for everyone. The gospel is not, or deep study of God is not just so that we can know God more, so that we can teach. The deep study of God is so that we can know Him and live in light of that, and that changes everything. And that's for everyone. And I think he's excited to say, well, let's think about how we can think about deep discipleship within the local church after we've established that it is the primary place where that happens. Is the local church.
No, it's good. It's good. As he moves on, he really kind of moves towards a bit more, trying to solve the problem or trying to solve the issue. There's a lot of, he compares two things basically, community and learning.
Yes.
He speaks about them as sometimes like opposed to each other, or at least spoken of as opposed to each other. And he puts something different forward. Maybe walk us through that section of the book, what's going on in his mind there.
Yeah. So he asks the question, have we answered a both and question with an either or approach? And that's basically going to sum up what he's saying. He's saying, have we said you can only do one or the other one? Are we going to be community focused, or are we going to be learning focused? And he's got this term called highest stated purpose, right? That he sets the stage with. So is our highest status purpose going to be community, or is our highest status purpose going to be learning? And he wants to kind of just challenge that either or paradox that we put, and to say, can't the church do both? And the question then becomes like, how and how is that even possible? And I think one thing to establish just right at the start is he's not saying that you're going to have just a learning group and then you have a community group and they don't overlap at all. He basically is saying that what has happened in the church is that there's a big focus on community, right? And even if we think in the light of COVID and just after COVID, the place that community has really been like established as this is important for us as embodied beings to be in community with other men and women. And that's an important part of what discipleship looks like. It's an important part of what it means to be part of the church, being known by brothers and sisters who both encourage us and rebuke us. That's core for our discipleship, even more so in a hyper-individualistic age that just says it's me and the Lord, even as Christians, where no, you've been saved into a community. And so we want to keep community as being important. He's saying in most of the context that he's gone into, community is pretty much the highest stated goal for the church, and the learning has been neglected, not completely discarded, but neglected. And he just wants to challenge that. Isn't it possible for us to have groups that are their highest status purpose is for learning, and they involve community. So it's not individuals learning; it's a group learning context. And what about if we have community focused groups, which also include learning? Now, again, how that plays itself out is challenging. But what I find really helpful is we have to ask the question, what are our groups that we have actually achieving, right? And sometimes I think we are overly optimistic, thinking that our groups are achieving, that everyone's learning everything and they're getting community, right? And we're trying to do everything in one group, and we end up not doing either of the two. And so I think that's where this is helpful, is saying it's okay to have community focused groups where learning is not your highest stated goal, right? And to remember that and to recognize that. But if that is what we're going to doing, there needs to be a space where learning is the highest stated goal, and especially in light of making whole disciples, which isn't just being known by others, but actually knowing God. You want to create a space for that to exist as well.
100%. I think this is really, really helpful. That he clearly moves away from us feeling we need to choose either one of those.
Yes.
And so we need to admit that we need both.
Yeah.
Because often I think in those, when we're faced with either one of those problems, we tend to be reactionary.
Yeah.
So you walk into a church which has community as the highest stated purpose, and you react to that and you say less of that, more learning. Or you walk into a church which is kind of learning as the highest stated purpose. There's a felt lack of community. Drop that. We need to focus on community. And what's great about his approach is he says we need both. Let's just be realistic.
Yes.
And the other thing which is incredibly helpful is he says we shouldn't expect to achieve both of those ends with one space.
Yeah.
And I think this is just so helpful to me, thinking about kind of like a weekly group. You've got, say at best, an hour and a half or 2 hours on a Wednesday evening for a classic small group, right? To do like community really well and learning really well in that space. I mean, that's a very, very tall order on 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so, his suggestion is to create two different spaces, which have one with learning as the highest stated purpose, one with community, and with the caveat that just because learning is the highest stated purpose, it doesn't mean community is not happening.
Yeah.
It just means it's not the highest stated purpose, and vice versa. I think one of the obvious questions off the back of this for him, and he addresses this in the book, is what about people's time? Who's going to find time for this? How would he answer that question? Because essentially what you're asking somebody is to commit to, on top of a Sunday service, 2 additional things in a week.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily know if he says you'd have to do both. So the way in which he answers it may be different to how I would answer that question, but the way that he would answer this question, if I have to go on what I understand from the book, would be to say that we have to recognize where disciples are. If I meet with you and you are kind of theologically thought through, but not community kind of focused, and you only have time for one, then we push towards community as highest the highest goal, right? So that's how he would answer it. He's like, it's not that you need to do both in order to kind of be a deep disciple. We just recognize at different stages in one's life, there are different things that are needed, and you're going through different things. So people with kids, we all can recognize that it would probably be very difficult to do 2 of these in a week. But let me caveat that just with my experience. I've seen that people who are learning a lot about God, and I mean that not in just knowledge, but their heart are being gripped by what they are learning. They grow their capacity to want to be involved in what God is busy doing. And so my experience has been both at BTI and even just at Reach, the church where I'm at right now, as I've been implementing some of this stuff, the people who come there and are gripped by who God is and what he is doing by deeply like drinking from scripture, they are the ones that are overly excited to get involved wherever the Lord is busy working, because the whole aim of learning focused groups is to lift our eyes towards God, see who he is and what he is busy doing. And so I do think a question about capacity, from the outside, we see it and we're like, that can't work. My experience in practice has been that capacity changes because it's not a burden to go to something. The people don't see it necessarily as, oh, I've got another thing I have to attend. They are actually quite excited for that, and to be kind of really part of what's happening in the church. So
because discipline follows desire.
Yeah, that's true, precisely. And so, yeah, that's how I would probably answer. What we've been doing at our church is our learning focused group, and there may be many other ways, is happening bi-weekly to both allow those who are coming to have a bit more time to actually do some of the readings that I give, but then also so that we make sure that they are, because we feel it is important for them to be in their community focused group weekly. So our push is for people to.
So only every second week you're doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how we've been starting to implement that at our church, and
that's helpful.
Yeah, that's what I think you'd say.
I think just off the back of your comment on kind of spending time focusing on God and that having an impact on capacity, or at least desire to get stuck in. I think he says something similar near the end of the book in comparing these learning spaces to being missional.
Yes.
I think another one of the kind of false dichotomies which is sometimes made in churches thinking through these things is, what if we spend so much time on like our own maturity, thinking like about how we're going to grow and how we are doing community, that you never kind of look outside, you never look beyond. And he was saying in his experience, the exact opposite has been true for the exact same reason. As folk lift their eyes to God and are captured by just how magnificent he is, and they grow in their knowledge and their love of him, you almost can't help. It's a natural kind of a natural outworking of that you connect with folk and engage with folk about some of these things, which is just a really helpful way to think about that kind of stuff as well. I think often the either ors aren't really either ors.
Yeah.
And it's noticeable. I think on that front as well, at least in my experience, one of the biggest reasons folk we struggle with engaging with people about the gospel and about the Bible and God and stuff, is because sometimes we just don't know what to say, and so more often than not, we just don't know. And so there's a very real sense in which being in a space which is intentionally focused on growing in our knowledge and understanding of God almost instantly removes that barrier. As soon as you walk out of some of those sessions, you suddenly do know. Not everything, but
no, of course,
it breaks that hindrance down.
And it's a space to ask questions where you are kind of, you're not taking away from the community when you ask questions. I think there are many benefits to that. And I've just been greatly encouraged to see this in practice. I mean, it is one of the greatest joys of my kind of life as a Christian to have seen the fruit of BTI, to see men and women, and let me be very clear, I'm not taking all the credit that BTI is the reason why this is happening, but to see especially students who come and who lifted their eyes to see who God is, the way in which he has redeemed the people for himself, the place that the church has, and then to see them years later doing apprenticeships, being involved in children's ministry, kind of apologetics, there's even just faithful men and women at work, right? To see them kind of flourish there where God has placed them, it's just beautiful to see. And it showed me that while there are those who will come to learning focused groups and just be there for their own self-righteous kind of I want to know so that I can prove someone else wrong, many, many more come and they're captured by a better vision of what God is busy doing, and they're actually energized to both go and make disciples and be on mission. So I think that dichotomy that gets placed is just not in touch with the reality that I've been very privileged to have seen.
Maybe last thing for us to chat through, as he unpacks his kind of plan or model for some of these learning spaces, right? So the spheres in his church which have their higher stated purposes, growing in the knowledge and love of God, learning spaces. What are some of the kind of essentials for him? What does he say a disciple needs on that front to grow?
Yeah. This is kind of the first thing you run into after you've established, hey, maybe it's a good idea to have these learning spaces. What are you actually going to then teach, right? Like, and so he puts down 3 buckets that I think is very helpful, that are very helpful, and I think that we can learn from. Of course, you can change this, and I don't think he'll argue that this is the biblical 3 buckets.
That's right. He actually says you can add and take buckets away as you see fit.
Yeah, but I think it's helpful. So the 3 buckets are firstly Bible, and that is just coming to grips, the way I understand it, not just, hey, I want to understand Ephesians or I want to understand Romans. It's actually, I want to grow my people's understanding of God's story, the way in which he's worked in history to save a people for himself, that's focused on Christ as the one who has achieved that, and where everything is going. So basic Bible overview, and of course anything else you then do fits into understanding the biblical drama, as we would call it. So Bible is the 1 bucket, coming to grips with God's story as it revealed in Scripture. Secondly is doctrine, and this bucket is really helping us to put everything together. God speaks, we listen, but he's spoken a lot. He's given us his whole word, and we want to be thinking, how does this apply to life right now? Right. And so doctrine helps us to take all of God's scripture that he's given us and seek to apply it to specific situations. And that starts off with kind of very broadly speaking, okay, some of the creeds, right? Apostles' Creed, basic Trinity, how do we think about Christ and his 2 natures, the incarnation, his roles. And so it's basic doctrine, starting off with the creeds and then moving and fleshing that out a bit. And I think here it's very helpful to think of it as doctrine for life. I know Kyle Worley, I never know how to pronounce his name. He says that we repeat in times of ease what we will recall in times of hardship. And I think that's basically the doctrine aspect, is we want to think carefully about who God is as he has revealed himself, so that when life comes, that we can rest in that which we have learned. And that's true in suffering. I'm busy teaching a doctrine module now at my church, and it seems so at times kind of out there. Why are we learning about God's attributes? What does that have to do? And then life happens, And those are the things that get called into question. Like, oh, I can rest. God is all-knowing and He's all-powerful. Do you know how good that is for my soul right now? I maybe won't understand everything, but I can rest because I know this is who God is, because I've learned that in times of ease. And now in times of hardship, I can recall that. So that's the second bucket is doctrine, and that will include like how do we apply scripture to parenting or kind of marriage and so on. So there's a lot that can fall in that bucket. And then the third bucket is spiritual disciplines. And I think here he's actually very helpful. We think we can give those first two buckets and that solves everything. But the reality is that we live day-to-day lives, and we need to be constantly reminding ourselves of who God is. So what are the spiritual disciplines that are going to like enable us to do that? And so spiritual disciplines will include like daily reading, daily prayer, even just going to church weekly, the sacraments, and meditating, all those kind of things. But just thinking, what are good habits that God has given us to really root ourselves both in His story and what He has revealed. So those are the three buckets, and I think all three are needed to kind of grow.
Yeah, I think
holistic disciples.
I think what's so helpful about them is when he gives the three buckets and he unpacks them a little bit, you quickly realize what his offering is not just head knowledge.
Yes.
So I mean, as he speaks about, just an understanding of the Bible, understanding of the story, God's story, how He's revealed Himself, the role He plays in that, the role Christ plays in that, how we fit in with that, the trajectory of history. You can see how that's not just knowing stuff, but how it applies to you and your role and your place in that. The doctrine bucket or the beliefs bucket, you've already spoken so well on how those things, our doctrine, our theology is really, when the rubber hits the road on the day-to-day, not only you personally living that out, but even answering questions in terms of apologetics and that kind of stuff. All of that falls under that umbrella. And then you've got the spiritual disciplines, which is your personal life before the Lord, right?
Yes.
In many ways, community almost is a spiritual discipline too, right?
Yes.
You've got kind of church attendance and evangelism and listening to sermons and other spiritual discipline, Bible reading, prayer, fasting, all that kind of stuff. You quickly see what he's advocating for here is not just like a smart church.
Yes.
That's actually not what he's after.
Not at all.
I think it just shows so helpfully what he means by being a deep disciple with spaces that have their high stated purpose as learning. It's not just knowing stuff. It's knowledge which transforms life.
I think he would argue that at the core, what he's trying to do is to give people what they need so that they are worshippers of God. And that includes like understanding God's story, knowing Him deeply, and living that out daily. And that's all for the sole purpose of God's glory, right? And it's not about head knowledge. I mean, I think it is. I just said it a while earlier. There will be head knowledge, right? And there will be people who kind of misuse that. But be careful to allow the fear of that to deprive our people from the goodness of knowing our God.
Right.
That's just kind of my final push. So try it.
Yeah, for sure. I've mentioned this again a few times already after the book, but I think this is something that the thrill of orthodoxy just like imprinted on my mind. Trevin Wax had said in that book that one of the best ways for you to love somebody is to know them. And the more you know them, the better you love them. And that was just so helpful in putting to bed this idea that knowing God is somehow something different to loving Him, or that loving Him and growing in love for Him is somehow possible without even knowing Him.
Yeah.
And I think that JT picks up on that and shows that in a really practical way so well here. Yeah, great book. Maybe as we wrap up, any kind of final concluding thoughts
I've got a
from
quote,
you?
that I want to read, because this is the quote that I use in my class. Precisely, it's by Kevin DeYoung. He's got a new little book called Daily Doctrine. It's excellent. But he says that as he just kind of sets the tone of what he's doing, we learn that we might love, we grow as we behold glory, we dig deeper in doctrine that we might soar higher in worship. God is not just the object of our study. He is the one who reveals all there is to know about himself, and the one in himself who is worthy of all our devotion. We dig deeper in doctrine that we might soar higher in worship. Amen? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is kind of our hope, in at least my hope as I read this book, and as I encourage you guys all to pursue this, or at least consider it.
Yeah, for sure. Final thoughts as we wrap up?
Give it a try. Let me really encourage you. I've been running this group now at our church for a year and a bit, and at BTI it was primarily students, and it was outside of the church, and that was difficult because that brought a disconnect with the discipleship that happens within community, in the community groups that you have. I've just found it so encouraging at my church right now. There's teenagers that are doing this. There's really clever men that know more than I do. There are 75-year-old ladies who are coming to the group. There's a whole diverse group of people. And as they are kind of spending time here, they are coming to me and they're saying, this is amazing. They learning more about who God is, and it's growing their love for God and for Jesus. And from the outside, I think people was like, what? This can't happen. But when you try it, I think you'd be surprised that people are really yearning for a deeper relationship with God. And part of that, not the whole part, but part of that is a deeper knowledge of him as he has revealed himself. So I would encourage everyone to try and pursue some of that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The giveaway.
Yes, tell us, Con.
So how can you enter for the giveaway? There's three things that you need to do. Okay. The first is you need to follow both of our Instagram pages. By both, I don't mean Frenchman myself.
No.
By both, I mean follow the Berean Bookclub Podcast on Instagram, and follow Christian Book Discounters on Instagram as well. So that's the first thing. Follow the accounts. The second thing is tag 2 friends in the comments of this post, I think.
Yep.
And then the third thing is to subscribe to Christian Book Discounters newsletter. You can find the link in the description or in the bio of our social accounts, so you'll be able to find it there. Follow our accounts, tag 2 friends in the comments, subscribe to the newsletter, and then you stand a chance to win this very copy, which was touched.
Yeah, we can sign it. I'm just kidding. That's rubbish. So do get involved there and start commenting of some people that you think could actually enjoy the book as well. And we are excited for the next one, because our next book is the most sold book after the Bible.
Yeah, well, what? I don't know if that's still true.
I think so. I could be mistaken, but
I heard the Guinness World Book of Records overtook it.
Oh, really?
I want to get the copy.
Well, show us the copy, Con. The Pilgrim's Progress. So it's a classic, right? We've done Hind's Feet for High Places.
Yes.
Oh man, that was so good for me. I love that book. But The Pilgrim's Progress is the one we're going to be doing next. It's an allegory written about the Christian life, and it's really, really well written. I was telling someone, I think I told you, the way in which Pilgrim's Progress helps you to kind of just visualize some of the Christian struggles that we go through, whether it's little Christian with envy. I'm listening to the book with my boys on the way to school, and so we talk about little Christian quite a lot. I'm hoping, I actually told them, I'm going to record them for the podcast next time. I'm just going to give them an opportunity to tell you guys what they love about the book, just to see how this is applicable both for children and for us as adults. But it's an excellent book, and I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah, usually looking forward to that. We've got a copy to give away as well, but we'll chat about the details of that in the next episode. Until then,
grace and peace. Cheers, guys.